938 Live. This is Talkback.
Now, earlier this week, Parliament passed a new bill on transboundary haze pollution that will impose fines of up to $2 million on errant companies. Environment and Water Resources Minister Vivian Balakrishnan says the bill is not a silver bullet, but a step that introduces novel elements into law. Now, in Parliament, members of Parliament had a lengthy debate and they raised a multitude of questions and concerns over 2 days. They were concerned about the extraterritorial nature of the bill, as well as what role the government can play in ensuring that palm oil products are sourced sustainably and whether the fines are high enough to act as an effective deterrent. Dr. Balakrishnan said Singapore has the legal right under the objective territorial principle to take action against those irresponsible actions elsewhere causing harm within Singapore. Do you think Singapore's new transboundary haze pollution bill would spur countries in the region to take action against companies that contribute to the haze themselves? Now, is the $2 million fine enough of a deterrent for big companies to adhere to responsible methods of clearing forests? To what extent are you really confident that this new law would help bring bluer skies to the region? If not, what more do you think can be done, both here and where the fires take place? Call us on 669-11938.
Now, this bill will give Singapore the legal power to serve notices on entities, including those that do not have assets or a presence here in Singapore. And the notice could be served personally or to an officer of a company when the individual or the partner is in Singapore. The National Environment Agency will be working closely with the Immigration and Checkpoints Authority to know when the person is in Singapore. And Dr. Balakrishnan said there is a need to tread carefully with this new legislation, as there is no precedence on how it'll work in practice. However, he has given the assurance that the Act will be reviewed when it comes into effect to see whether it works as a deterrent. So as consumers, are we willing to play our part and put pressure on companies to ensure that their products are made from palm oil or other resources that are sustainably sourced? And how can we work as partners of the regional and global community to claim the right for us and our children to breathe good, clean air? You can start calling us, of course, on 669-11938, or you can leave us your comments on Facebook, official 938 Live. Now, joining us today is Dr. Nigel Sizer. He's the Global Director of the Forest Program at the World Resources Institute. He joins us on the line from Washington, D.C., and in the studio with us as well is the Singapore Institute of International Affairs Deputy Director and Fellow Chua Chin Wei. Guys, thank you very much for joining us.
Now, Nigel, first of all, you have been quoted in other media as saying that the $2 million fine is not a significant deterrent to large firms, but what should be a significant deterrent is the potential damage to their reputation. Tell us more, elaborate more on that.
Yes, that's right. Good morning. For the large companies, a $2 million fine is insignificant on their balance sheets. It's the reputational risk that they face that's the key issue here. So if you're a major company and you're accused of illegal burning in Indonesia, and furthermore that's polluting the skies not only of Indonesia but Singapore and Malaysia and across the region, and this lands you in court in Singapore, your customers, your investors, your bankers, your insurers, everyone is going to be aware of this and is going to be looking at you askance, and it's going to be a real issue for the company. So I think that's the real deterrent. The reputational risk here is enormous for companies who are caught doing this illegally.
The fact is that in Indonesia, state prosecutors have lodged legal suits against errant firms, but not very successfully because either the indictments were weak, the court rulings were flawed. So considering all of these difficulties, what else really do we need to have in place for this bill to be truly effective, Nigel?
Well, that's right. There are a number of cases in process now in Indonesia. We've been working with the Indonesian government on this to some extent. I've personally seen a much higher level of willingness from very senior officials across several government agencies in Indonesia to bring these cases to court and to successfully prosecute. The problem that those officials have pointed out to us very candidly is that often the quality of the evidence, the way the evidence was collected, the ability of the prosecutors, and let's say the objectivity of the judiciary is often not ideal. And of course, we're quite aware that there's often significant corruption involved in these kinds of cases on the ground in Indonesia as well. This has been going on for many years. It's well known and is not denied by the government. So the key is to really strengthen the law enforcement process here. One of the things that we're working with the government on right now through Global Forest Watch Fires, a new initiative that we launched a few weeks ago, is providing them with ultra-high-resolution satellite imagery that shows exactly where the fires are burning. You can see the flames, the smoke from the flames. You can see every single tree on these images. And if there are major fires that happen to be within an individual company's concession, this imagery is, we believe, rock-solid evidence that could be used in court. The Indonesian government is excited about this, and we're also providing it, of course, to the Singaporean government, to anyone who wants it, who can use it as evidence in any cases that are brought.
So that solves the problem of traceability. That solves the problem of traceability to a great extent, a great step in the right direction. But considering the problems you mentioned earlier, for instance, political will, corruption on the ground, would all of that really stand in the way of any efforts to even improve traceability?
Well, we'll see, I think, is the answer to that question. That information is now available. It's available to the public as well. The public will be able to see whether the government acts upon this information. The officials that we have spoken to are determined to improve the law enforcement process. And to some extent, this kind of imagery and this kind of evidence can circumvent some of the weaknesses that we see, particularly at the local level. So national agencies and some of the leading national officials are keen to move these cases forward. I think where we see problems is when we get right down to the local level and the local evidence gathering and prosecutions process.
Chua, perhaps you could step in here. Obviously, there are challenges. Let's talk about the local challenges at the local level that Nigel just mentioned. How complex is this? How can we help this process forward, considering those challenges?
I think one of the key challenges at the local level still remains as that there's always overlapping concessions. So we know that within Indonesia, different government departments have the rights to give out so-called concessions, the right to develop a piece of land. So on the ground, it is almost like drawing many overlapping circles. So in overlapping concessions, there are multiple ownerships. But this is something that can be resolved with greater transparency. I think with the Global Forest Watch that WRI has launched. And most importantly, if the Indonesian government are able to share the official concession maps with the public, that will definitely lend more clarity as to who exactly owns a particular piece of land.
It's all about traceability as well, isn't it? And so, with this bill, it creates criminal and civil liabilities for errant companies, but it's still that the burden of proof is still needed there. How difficult is this going to, happen? Maybe let's bring Nigel back. Hi, Nigel.
Hi.
Yeah. So there's this burden of proof. Even though with technology, there is still going to be a burden of proof.
Absolutely. And Chin-Wei made a very important point. The quality of maps that different agencies have that map out who is actually responsible for different parts of these landscapes across Sumatra and Kalimantan are very variable. But we've also seen significant progress on that front as well. Over the last few months, we see major companies sharing their concession data much more readily with some agencies. We've seen the major oil palm companies that are members of the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil, the leading certification system for palm oil. They've all committed to make public their concession boundaries. They're doing that through a partnership with us and Global Forest Watch. So everyone will be able to see a lot of the oil palm companies' operations. And that will set a precedent, I think, for other companies to come forward and share more detailed and accurate information. But you're absolutely right. The real test of this will only come with time as some test cases are developed. We need to see the Indonesian government, of course, cooperating closely with the Singaporean government on the law enforcement side. I think an interesting aspect that the Singaporean government can also help on, in addition to the, I think, significant deterrent effect of the new law, they can also perhaps help the Indonesians to unravel some of the ownership structures of the companies. So where fires are detected in a particular concession, a particular subsidiary, often the ultimate ownership, the beneficial owners of that company are far from clear. There may be tentacles back into Singapore, and that's where Singapore could also perhaps help with some forensic accounting and intelligence work and so on to uncover the structures of some of the larger groups, so that the ultimate people responsible for these operations on the ground can also be brought to justice if they have committed crimes.
To what extent do we also need to think about the very local level communities here, meaning the farmers who are actually carrying out these slash and burn operations? Chinwei?
I think first of all, we come back to the basic analysis, which is for a farmer to clear land, why are they still using fires? And really it's one of compelling economic reasons. If we consider the so-called average annual income of a farmer, it could be a few $1,000s a year. And that is also the same amount of money that you got to spend to clear land mechanically. So what it means is that if we want farmers to change their ways, they actually need capacity, they need financing to actually bring in machinery to clear the forest, to clear the land. So the farmers works together with the medium and larger size companies. So there must be a certain way for the larger companies to come in and support the farmers, whether to help them to improve productivity, to improve yield, to use better seeds, and to help coordinate some of the logistics that are required for bringing in this heavy machinery.
Do you think something like a haze pollution transboundary bill would actually spur some of these companies to do that finally?
I'm cautiously optimistic that it should, because the supply chain exists as a web. So big companies buy from smaller companies, buy from farmers. So really it is in the imperative advantage of everyone to make sure that the industry continue to grow, and also to grow in a green way.
The vision to some extent is also to spur countries in the region to take action against these companies that contribute to the haze, is it not? Chinwei? So in other words, it's not just about Singapore having the right to prosecute these errant companies, it's also to pressure the Indonesian government, for instance, to do this on its own.
That's right. At the ASEAN government,
how successful do you think it'll be?
Right. At the ASEAN government level, if we recap, last year at the leaders' meeting, we have launched the haze monitoring system. So basically, the system is supposed to include information like hotspot coordinates, concession ownership information. It is really meant to function as a so-called rapid response to fires on the ground, to quickly pinpoint exactly who owns that piece of land. So there's some progress on that front, but it's far from completed. So it'd be great if the new administration, Indonesia, could lead the ASEAN region to really implement this haze monitoring system so that it could be fully functional.
Right. Just we've got a little bit of time left with Nigel. Nigel, Indonesia signed the Transboundary Haze Agreement in 2002, but it's not been ratified by Parliament yet. But some legislators in the current Parliament are trying to push to see if they've got that last-minute impetus to push the bill through before they expire at the end of September. Do you think there is enough political will for this to really happen?
Well, I'd be foolish to, I think, try to predict the actions and decisions of the Indonesian Parliament on an issue like this. I think the key thing here is actually not the Transboundary Haze Agreement. That gets a lot of attention, but what's really needed is action on the ground. As we've seen from this entire discussion with you this evening, it's about law enforcement, it's about land use planning, better concession maps, information sharing, and so on. The agreement might help with some aspects of that, but again, it will come down to the capacity of the Indonesian government to actually move forward with those tasks. The Vice President Budiono, has set up a working group across over a dozen agencies to coordinate a national action plan to combat the haze. The incoming President, Jokowi, has signaled that he has a very good understanding of these issues. That was very clear in some of the statements he's been made. He's actually a trained forester. And I think we're going to see a significant improvement under his leadership on these issues as well. The real challenge here is that capacity on the ground is still insufficient, and so a major investment is needed by Indonesia. Singapore can help. other governments in the region can help. Hopefully Indonesia will be more receptive to that help as time goes by to address some of the weaknesses on the ground.
You did mention earlier that Singapore can really help in terms of unraveling the ownership structures of the errant companies, the suspected companies as well. In a nutshell, what else can we do to support Indonesia?
Well, I think you made some very good points at the beginning of the show. So Singaporean consumers, all of us are using these products. We're using pulp and paper. We're using palm oil. It's in literally hundreds of products in the supermarket. We're using it every day. Make it clear to the companies, to the retailers, to the producers that you care about these issues. Go to their websites, send them emails, look at their sustainability statements, call them up, ask them questions, ask them what they're doing to address these issues. Some of them are making really great strides and showing a lot of leadership on this, but others are still way behind and struggling to catch up. The other thing I'd urge all your listeners to do is take a look at our system, fires.globalforestwatch.org. It's online, and there you can see up-to-date, real-time information about the fires. You can see the ultra-high resolution imagery, the haze patterns, and so on. And you can join in the conversation through that platform about what we're doing to address these issues.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Dr. Nigel SIIA, Global Director of the Forest Program at the World Resources Institute. To what extent can we as consumers play a part? Will it be significant to these companies if we stopped using their products? We are, after all, a small market. Going to be talking more about that as well when we continue on Talkback. Call us 669-11938. Come on, I'm sure the haze bothers you when it is over Singapore. So tell us what you think needs to be done in order to make sure that errant companies are brought to justice, and how can you play your part as well. Talking today about Singapore's new Transboundary Haze Pollution Act. Will it be effective in terms of making sure that the haze stops affecting Singapore? Will action on big companies, errant companies, be enough to make sure that they become more responsible in their methods of clearing forests? Give us a call, 669-11938. Now, the bill will give Singapore the legal power to serve notice on entities, including those that do not have assets or a presence in Singapore. Talking today with Singapore Institute of International Affairs Deputy Director and Fellow Chua Chinwei. Now, Chinwei, let's talk about the extraterritoriality of these laws, of this haze pollution bill. What exactly does it allow us to do, and what are its limitations?
Well, it allows us to use the law and prosecute any company that is found to be guilty of clearing land by fires and therefore causing haze to Singapore. The limitations are equally real. Well, for people who are not based here, how are we going to serve the notice to them? How are we going to make them accountable? So I think in the first line, the coordination between the Ministry of Environment and also the checkpoint authorities, SIIA, in terms of tracking people who are going through will be useful, because as and when if such corporate owners or executives do pass by Singapore territory, there is a good opportunity to serve those notice to them.
Okay, so how do you envisage it actually being applied and implemented here? Because there has been talk about ordinary citizens also being able to take civil action against these companies. But most of the time, do you envisage the state actually taking action against these companies, using this law to take action?
Yes, I think the prosecution will be twofold. So first, the state will have to initiate the criminal proceedings, and once a company has been found to be guilty, to be convicted in court, that will give further grounds for individuals to then take up the civil case against such companies. And it will be useful if public institutions, the hospitals, could actually represent some of these people who are afflicted by the haze.
Okay, so some form of representative action as well. Give us a call, 669-11938. Peter joins us now. Hi, Peter.
Hello, good morning, Bharati Andre.
Good morning, sir.
Happy National Day, Majulah Singapura.
Majulah Singapura, indeed. Thank you so much, Peter, for remembering it's National Day tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay, remember, I did participate on this talk. I told you that true, that about this haze problem. Now, I suffered quite a bad deal last year. That's why I'm very, very keen to talk about it. And because now Parliament have, more or less already introduced a bill. But honestly speaking, to my own opinion, this is going to be very complicated, very complex, because in Indonesia, I've been that country many times during my younger days, So I see the mentality, even the would-be elected President Joko seems to quite support the issue what our government brought about.
Mm-hmm.
But all I can say, when I heard this in March also, about the haze coming and with the El Nino also coming, whatever it is, all I can say, I thank God, I pray that the haze blow away from Singapore. That's all I can say. Because other things, I do not know, high pressure, low pressure. But all I know that I'm so glad my prayer answered.
Thanks very much for that, Peter. Really appreciate it. Peter did say, however, that he acknowledges that it can be very complicated on the ground in Indonesia. So, Chinwei, we did talk about those complications earlier, how complex it is. And of course, Nigel did mention as well that Singapore can support the entities in Indonesia, civil society organizations, the government especially, the Indonesian government, in terms of unraveling the ownership structures of the companies involved. How else can Singapore help Indonesia?
I think there are some investments that are made through Singapore, and some of these investments could be done by, companies that are listed on our exchange. So if we look at the reporting structure in SGX today, it is voluntary. So according to a recent report done by NUS Business School, about 10% of the companies listed have some form of voluntary sustainability reporting. So perhaps going forward, the government could explore ways to encourage more companies to report on their sustainability measures, actions they are doing on the ground, whether in Singapore or in other countries that they're vested in. And such disclosures will be very useful to help educate the public and also help other governments understand how these companies are operating on the ground.
Let's talk about Indonesia, bringing pressure to bear on the Indonesian government to take action against these errant companies. What are the challenges in that regard?
Well, perhaps one of the key challenges is that some of these companies may have complicated ownerships, and some of these owners might be related to people in the current administration or maybe in the new administration. So perhaps Indonesia might need to go through an internal exercise, a review, to see how it can segregate the so-called commercial interest from the political powers, and then really for the administration to take a fair, measured way towards building up its industry in a responsible way.
Now, earlier on, we heard from Nigel saying that Indonesia has actually now begun to invest in the Global Forest Watch Fires platform. Do you think this is an indication, of their willingness to really try and curb the haze beginning from the source itself?
Yeah, I think not just for haze, it is in Indonesia's interest to ensure that its land-based industries such as palm oil, pulp and paper, timber, or even rubber, all these industries create so-called revenue for the government and also create jobs for the local people. And it is really a key element to maintaining stability in the outer regions of Indonesia. And there's every motivation for them to get the industry to act in a proper way.
All right.
Give us a call, 669-11938. Mr. Tan joins us now. Hi, Mr. Tan.
Yeah, good morning. Hello.
Yeah. Yes, Mr. Tan, we can hear you.
Yeah, very important is in trying to get people to do things your way, especially if they have the muscle, they have that liberty of doing what they like and can't do a thing about it. I think this thing about taking legal action against them is a waste of time, basically because you are talking about an international law. So the idea is to be friendly with your neighbors, friendly in many ways, right? Either you cooperate with them, be nice to them, or if it cannot be done, those you know how to find out who are the owners or this thing, people related to the company. I mean, within bracket, break their back. In other words, those people who's got a lot of money here, give them a hard time, And then they understand the language is, if you don't cooperate me, I'll break your back. Finish. That's it.
Thanks, Mr. Tan, for that. Now, let's talk about this for a moment, Chin-Wei. To what extent do you think such laws would only result in these errant companies scaling back their presence in Singapore? And that they would just do that in order to avoid any sort of involvement with our government and, of course, to be prosecuted under the Haze Bill?
I think there will be a negligible effect on the so-called scaling back of investment. Firstly, if you look at the companies who are listed in Singapore belonging to this sector, and actually 7 out of 8 have so-called make proper sustainable reporting. And so if you look at the bigger palm oil players, they have all come up to say that they stick to a few principles. No burn on the ground, no development on a peatland, they are easily combustible, and no deforestation. So clearly the companies who are in Singapore do pay attention to the actual practices that they do on the ground. So I don't foresee them just packing out their bags and leave, because Singapore is a business hub, a finance hub for them. And really now the next step is for them to see how they can evolve and make Singapore also their sustainability hub.
Okay, let's see if it's going to have that type of effect. Now, Chin-Wei, earlier, Dr. Nigel SIIA, Global Director of the Forest Program at the World Resources Institute, mentioned that consumers need to play a big role here as well. Consumers need to be able to choose sustainable palm oil and other products. But we do know that very few products are actually certified by the RSPO, the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil. Plus, the critical mass is rather small in Singapore of consumers. So will that sort of action really have any impact on these companies?
Yeah, I think on your later point about size, indeed size does matter. So yes, as a consumer country of 5 million, we're not going to make a wave of change in the world. But I think it's good for us to also take the lead to show what we can do as a small country. I think Norway is also doing the same. They do apply certain pressure through consumer actions. And I think within Asia, it'd be great if countries like China, like India, who are also large importers of these products, can encourage their consumers to buy from responsible sources.
What's the incentive for those countries to do so?
Well, you will leave behind a world that is better.
Okay, and let's hope that's enough of a business case for them to do so
Cleaner
as well.
air to breathe.
But here's the thing, how do you think consumers in Singapore can be helped to choose sustainable palm oil products, considering there are so few of them at this point? And also, it's difficult. I mean, if you look at the ingredients list of a particular product, it's hard to tell where the palm oil comes from, who's responsible from it. Those things are not always listed.
Yes, I think the challenge really is in the labeling standards that we have on the products. And really, it is not just about palm oil. It's also about how efficient you produce the products, energy labeling, green labeling. So perhaps at the global level, it'd be great if we have some kind of harmonized way of labeling products, and you reflect what kind of features that you want to see in a product, whether is it carbon emissions, power efficiency, or even adherence to human rights or fair labor laws. So it's a very long-drawn exercise, but there must be consumer interest, not just in Singapore, but also worldwide, to see a transformation towards that area.
How can consumer education in this regard be boosted within Singapore?
I think as a start, perhaps some of the NGOs, for example, like Singapore Environment Council, or even our institute, Singapore Institute of International Affairs, we convene events involving the various stakeholders like governments, the key private sector companies, and also coordinating with the regional NGOs to bring across these messages to consumers and really help to share information, especially on which companies are doing responsible actions and which companies are not. And through such education, consumers can slowly get sufficient information to distinguish which are the good or bad products in their measure.
Some consumers also have observed that most of the palm oil is either untraceable, most of the palm oil in these products is either untraceable, or they do come from suspicious sources. So if most products come from suspicious sources, what are you left with to use on a daily basis, really?
Well, I think at the end of the day, apart from palm oil specifically, we do have substitute for such vegetable oil. So there is peanut oil, olive oil, some other forms of oil from other countries. So there are options available.
But palm oil is in a lot of other products as well, candles, soap, so on and so forth. Yeah. And those things can be rather difficult to trace.
But although it's difficult, but consumers should still put some pressure, especially on the consumer goods company who make these products, and they are the one who face the palm oil traders, oil producers, or some other types of company. It really is through the manufacturers getting the upstream producers to change the way that they produce.
To what extent do you think businesses here, distributors and retailers too, can play their part in terms of getting products only from those who produce their products sustainably?
I think we've seen some...
Should they be given incentives, for instance, to do that?
At this stage, it's hard for me to say whether incentives should be given to them. But without incentives at the very moment, we have seen some companies that are trying to do responsible procurement. So I read that companies like, say, CapitaLand, they're paying attention to where they buy their paper from. They make sure that it has a certain FSC standard. So we don't have to wait for the government to legislate such actions, but as individuals, as corporates, do what's best for yourself and also for the country. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Really appreciate it. Chua Chin-Wei from the Singapore Institute of International Affairs. And if you've got more to say about this, please continue talking to us on Facebook, Official 938 Live. Many thanks.